This is Vivian. Can you hear me?
Hey, Vivian, I can hear you. It was a little faint though.
Yeah, no, I've lost, for some reason, when I joined as a panelist, it threw me back to the agenda. And now I don't have the Zoom. I'm not open to Zoom. Weird. Huh. Are
Yeah.
you looking at chambers right now? Council chambers?
Yes, you should be seeing the chambers.
Okay, let me try this. There we go. Okay.
All right, Mr. Mayor, we're live and ready.
Okay, sounds good. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's Monday, September 25th, times 4:33 p.m. This is going to be a work session, and discussion topic today will be our drainage map and water management plan, and a presentation by HDR.
So good afternoon. My name's Casey Grundhauser, and my colleague Bill Spencer and I are here with HDR. First of all, thanks for coming out and joining us this afternoon. We are both part of HDR's water resource and engineering team based out of Anchorage, and we're excited to work with the city on the drainage mapping and stormwater management plan and program. The goal of the project is to develop a stormwater management plan that provides a strategic roadmap that's tailored to this community's needs. The grant, this is grant funded, and the planning effort will run through the end of 2024. So today we're opening it up to discussion to get feedback based on a variety of different topics that are related to stormwater management. In addition, for the survey currently being open, that survey will be open until the end of this week. And then this week we are also in town. We'll be walking through town and surveying and inventorying the storm drain system, as well as talking to Public Works and anyone else who we might run into about different storm drain concerns or potential pollutant concerns. This time around, as we do the survey, it will be combined to create the drainage mapping. And then next summer, we will produce that drainage mapping and show it to the community, as well as find those identified sources or locations of potential pollutants and move forward with what we're calling drainage improvement projects, or DIPs, to present that in the stormwater management plan going forward for the city. So if anyone had any questions or comments, we have had some different responses and really helpful responses from the survey. So that's been working out. And then we're going to target some of those locations that have been called out to make sure we look at them.
Yeah, maybe I'll just introduce myself real quickly. Bill Spencer. I am a water resource engineer with HDR, and I grew up on the Kenai Peninsula. My parents homesteaded there in the early 50s between Kenai and Seldovia. So I grew up down here, and if those of you that are cross-country skiers may and have skied at Lookout, you've seen some of my trail designs up there. So but I'm also a water drainage engineer. And mostly for this project, I'm providing the gray hair, and Casey's producing all the mapping and technical expertise. So glad to be on the project, and look forward to input from people.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate those intros. So is there going to be, for like tonight, was there going to be any additional kind of PowerPoint or anything, or is it just primarily to get input on the existing survey out there, or what's what's kind of the format here for this evening?
It was going to be just more of an open forum, a place that if the community had any more questions that they could come talk to us. There's no specific PowerPoint.
If
We
I
have-
may, but Casey, you had a list of questions, correct? Or like a list of areas that we could go through that we could talk about.
Yeah.
Like snow removal or drainage, to have those specific discussions about any concerns.
Yeah, we've gotten a couple of different, about 20 different responses from folks across the community. Most people are responding to the survey. We also have a phone number that they can call and then an email. And then I think some folks have also sent the cities directly some pictures that we've received. So there seems to be, we can start to go through the list I have here. Some concerns with Fulmore Avenue with either snow storage concerns. Let's see. Mostly snow storage concerns of having snow storage get kind of pushed or plowed onto residential lots. There's a couple of different other locations that also seems to be occurring. So we can look at those areas and maybe better determine places to put snow storage. There's also, let's see, Anderson Way near Young Street. There's some undersized or failing culvert concerns that were listed. And then several different instances of standing water. And that was one of the questions in the survey, standing water of more than 2 days after a rain event. And so if folks have seen locations like that, they can list them. So Anderson Way, especially near Young Street, and there's several other locations.
Have you guys had 2 dry days this summer?
No, not hardly.
Well, the last 2,
Ah, yes.
kind of, maybe 1.5 days it's been dry.
There were comments about drainage around the post office. It seems that one of the comments is creates somewhat of a temporary lake. So it sounds like maybe the existing drainage around that area might need some improvements. There's another comment about like bicycle and pedestrians along Fulmore and is it Block Street? Block. The comment was about that many people use those 2 streets more as pedestrian or on bicycles versus using Anderson Way, but that street can get kind of muddy. So having potentially better drainage along that area might be of value. There's a couple of comments about potholes kind of throughout the area. They didn't specify any specific location. More comments about Fulmore Avenue.
I think our primary focus for being here for the 3 or 4 days is to initially we'll probably walk all the streets, look at all the ditch lines, figure out where all the culverts are. So we're trying to look at the whole area on a macro level, figure out where the water's coming from, where it runs to, and any issues that it's having getting where it's trying to go. And then any potential sources of pollutants, if it's going straight into the harbor, for instance, and you don't want storm drainage going straight into the harbor, then we'll look at that and potential areas where it could be treated. But trying to get an overall view of it. And then this questionnaire helps us at sort of the micro level. Where are the, there's a street with potholes in it. Well, that may be an indication that water's ponding in that area. And then we go look at that and try to come up with a specific solution to that. But so 2 areas of focus for us in the next 2 or 3 days, and talking to the maintenance people that are working on the drainage system is really helpful to us. They're the people that know the area and know where the failures are.
So I have a question. When you guys are doing your storm drain mapping and you're making your observations like this, then is it better to do this kind of in a combination of on rainy days, so you can actually see active drainage occurring during a storm event? Or, I mean, do you need rain to be happening when you're doing this, or?
Not necessarily. We can figure out the slopes of the ditches, and of course, large storm and rain events leave behind telltale signs that we can see even when it's dry.
Yeah.
Grass gets laid down, or it erodes into a gravel bank or something. We can see all that stuff. So,
okay.
Nobody wants to thrash through too much wet brush.
No. A couple other questions that come to mind, just kind of some larger, bigger pictures as part of the overall scheme here. Obviously, it's stormwater, how to deal with it in general, and that includes the snow removal piece. So when you guys go through now and today, obviously our standards nowadays, I'm assuming, are way different than what they were, back in the 70s and 80s when a lot of this infrastructure was put in. Just kind of generally on a lot of these coastal communities, when you see, all of our gutter, say running down Main Street in Seldovia, and then it goes to a couple outfall lines directly out into the harbor. Is that generally what you guys still do, or now is that a no nowadays, and you have to divert that and deal with it in a different way? Or I guess I'm trying to understand what the overall main impacts might be as a result of something like this.
So yeah, I think my overall feel for drainage is that you, as best you can, you try to catch, infiltrate, and treat the smaller storms, which make up most of the yearly flow. So, storms are sort of classed on their return interval. So a 2-year storm is one that is a pretty good sized storm, one that you might only get once every 2 years. And generally, storm drain systems are designed around a 10-year storm, which is also, you figure a storm that only comes around once every 10 years, that's a pretty good sized storm event. And so the main infrastructure, you want to be able to treat the water from approximately a 10-year storm before you dump it into the harbor. And then you also have to design for the really big storms, a 50-year storm or a 100-year storm, and be able to bypass your treatment so that it doesn't wash out all the sediment that you've captured over the course of the 2-year storms or the 10-year storms. But you're right that back in the 80s, storm drain systems were just designed to get the water out of town and put it someplace else besides along the streets. And now with more nuanced design, we're trying to capture more of it, settle out more of the sediment, catch more of the pollutants, and then put that treated water someplace where it will have the lowest impact. And running it out into the waterfront right in front of town may not be the best way, but it may be the only place for it, in which case you'd probably want to treat it more before you put it out there. But yeah, the drive is for LID, which stands for low impact design, and generally that is providing more places for infiltration and treatment before you outfall it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yep, nope, totally understood. I was trying to get an idea of what, ultimately then, so for, I mean, are you designing some sort, is it individual treatment like at individual catch basins, or is it all basically going to be piped, the idea to pipe it to some sort of treatment facility work, and then be, you can deal with the sediments, the contaminants, and then then the discharge goes out an outfall to a specified area?
It sort of depends on, as we get a better feel for the network, that if you can catch the sediments and treat the water at the source, rain gardens off of people's gutters, for instance, and things like that, it's a lot more effective than if you allow it to accumulate into a huge rushing torrent and then try to treat that at the end of the pipe. So it's source treatment versus into pipes treatment. And if you can treat it at the source, it's often cheaper and easier and more effective than if you take the whole drainage from the entire city and put it into one 4-foot diameter outfall and then try to do something with it at the end. That can be pretty problematic.
Yeah, I would think that something like that in our case would definitely, make sense in terms of treating it at the source versus, trying to find somewhere and then, piping it over an extended, length of, an extended run where you might have to then have, additional lift stations and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about is that it gets a lot more nuanced if you're trying to incentivize people to treat the water coming off their roofs in a rain garden, for instance. That's sort of an individual effort, and that's different than the city taking on a big capital project and putting in an oil and grit separator at the end of a pipe. And so we'll have to sort of work our way through that and figure out where the politics lie for the thing in order for it to work out. But
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're done with this mapping, then you'll have pretty extensive information, and I imagine there's a bunch of supplementary information you'll have to go out and request, or try to solve as you're working through all the pieces and parts, towards a final product.
Yeah, that's correct. And of course, the other piece that plays in there is if you're going to have into pipe treatment, then you need a fair amount of area. The city would need an acre of land somewhere near the end of the pipe where they could put a sedimentation basin, for instance. And sometimes that's available and sometimes it isn't. So yeah, that's another piece that will play into it. We'll have to figure out land ownership and.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That's it for me. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may ask a question.
Yeah, you bet, Vivian. Go ahead.
Several times at our council meetings, we have had people come up who knew about that we were doing a storm drainage management plan. And several times it's been referenced that once the city of Seldovia's infrastructure is identified and we know what's going on, that right now the snow, when we push snow, it goes right off into the harbor. Now, many questions have been that the public has come up with. Do we want that to come down on us? Are we going to be facing a situation where we will no longer be able to push snow to the edge of the harbor, or it rolls into the slough going through this exercise that we're going through? That's been one question that keeps coming over and over. And if you could, and then another question I have, if you could clarify what you mean by, we have the two outfalls that our mayor was referencing, where the storm drains go and they pour out into the harbor, or wherever they are, the harbor, and wherever the other one is. are you saying that there would be some, well, maybe you have to figure out our infrastructure first, but there would be some way to collect that water before it goes down this outfall, and that we would have to process it somehow? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah,
There's two questions there, sorry.
we probably need to know a little bit more about your network before we weigh in on that. But if there was an area at the end of the pipe and it was decided that that was the politically easiest thing to do would to treat it at the end of the pipe, then there'd need to be an area where you'd have a sedimentation pond or some other structure that would treat it at the end of the pipe before you discharge it into the harbor. It's generally our preference to treat it before it gets collected, so that the water that is coming out of the end of that pipe is already fairly clean. And there may be various points in the system where you can put smaller sedimentation basins or catch some of it. Grassy swales is a pretty good example. Along roadways, you take some of the water that's been collected and you basically dam up a ditch so that that water collects there for a little bit of time and the sediment settles out of it, and then you pass it on down to the outfall. But yeah, right now we don't have all that stuff mapped out to know exactly what's going to be a good solution for you.
Okay, right, okay, and if you could address the snow in the harbor, what's a common practice now?
Yeah, I just have been working for the last 3 years on a new snow disposal site for Anchorage, and generally discharging your snow into the tidal zone is frowned upon. Because then of course all the sediment and everything that is collected in Anchorage, that there's a lot of traffic, and so there's a lot of heavy metals in that stuff. There's can be some salts if the roads get salted, and of course the road grit from all the traffic driving over it produces quite a bit of sediment, and all that stuff. If you take it to a snow disposal site, which of course requires you to pick it up and haul it somewhere, then you can settle all that stuff out in the sediments and the water that comes out of it. It's a little bit cleaner, and then you put that into a system and run it into the harbor. Probably preferable than just taking the snow and dumping it into the harbor, but it may be that your snow doesn't have a lot of salt in it, and that it doesn't have a lot of road grit and whatnot in it, in which case it's just snow. And that may take a little bit more study to figure that out. And of course, it's expensive to haul snow.
Right.
So we have to go through some of that, figure out how much snow you got, what the quality of it is, and whether the city has money to actually haul it somewhere.
Right, and I think that's been the general question and what stirred people's in their mind about how much more is this going to cost the city. And so what you're here doing right now is basically trying to figure out what our system is and what we do with our system, what our system does for us, and what we could do in the future, and if that's applicable to Seldovia. And so the data you're collecting is going to accomplish those things, we hope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. I guess one of the other master plans I did was for Girdwood, which also has a lot of snowfall and precipitation. And they don't pick any of their snow up and haul it anywhere. They push it in ditches, and then as it melts along the ditch lines and whatnot, they then treat that runoff. Actually, in Girdwood, there's not a lot of treatment at this point, but
Right.
it's on a fairly steep hillside, and water runs off of it pretty quickly. But we'll find out some of that stuff when we talk to the maintenance people about what your practices are for maintaining the roads. I would guess you don't put a lot of salt down There's
No.
not a lot of impervious surface here. And your solutions are going to be a great deal different than the ones in someplace like Anchorage or Wasilla, where they have a lot of salt, road grit, and pipe systems. How
Right.
extensive is the pipe system here in town? Is it mostly just ditch lines and culverts, or do you have storm drain systems?
We do have a storm drain through the mayor. We do have a storm drain system in the main section of town here. And that's on my list to try to find the maps and pull them out for you. They just ran into, for instance, there was construction happening 3 streets down. And this construction crew actually dug through a stormwater pipe because it was 12 feet into their property and nobody expected it to be there. So there is a small system within the city proper. And we'll pull that information for you. And
So
the
you-
rest is just culverts, and those could use some help, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of these culverts are only good for 30, 50 years, and then they start to die. You know, they're dig them up and replace them.
Hey, Bill, as far as like the final product and write-up, then will you guys cite, when you get into the regulatory piece of this, will you guys cite, some of the regulatory requirements that are, I know you mentioned, like, say, for example, snow removal, dumping it into a tidal zone is, ill-advised or not, not the preferred method, but I mean, I'm wondering is, where we're at these days in terms of EPA, DEC, in terms of if there's actual regulatory language, that prohibits communities from doing that, or if there's, if there are, waivers available, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. The answer, yes. We'll try to, a smaller municipality like this, in places, well, I think right now there's only 2 systems in the state that are regulated by the DEC, stormwater systems. Of course, one of them is Anchorage. I think Wasilla is about to become the second one, maybe Fairbanks is the second one, but places that are smaller than that don't come under that MS4, municipally separate stormwater systems, I think is the acronym. So your regulations, of course, are different, and the oversight is quite a bit different as well, but we'll research that for you.
Okay, fantastic. Anyone else with some additional questions, comments?
What other discussion topics does Casey have here? Flip that back open. No.
Just more comments about stormwater going into either the harbor or the slough directly. And there was quite a few different comments about flooding. So
I have a question through the mayor. So when you guys look at treatment, what does that look like besides settling? Is there another treatment process that goes, are you adding anything to that to treat it, or you're just allowing time for it to settle before it can?
So generally the pollutants that are associated with stormwater attach themselves to the sediment. So things like heavy metals, oil from cars, stuff that comes off of brake linings and things like that get into stormwater. Dog poop it's actually one of the major pollutants of stormwater. Most of that stuff attaches itself to the sediments, and so if you can come up with an effective way to treat the sediments, so that you can get those out of the water, you have got most of the pollutants out of your stormwater. And there are structures that some coastal communities, Oregon they actually get to the point where they're running their stormwater through charcoal filters to remove all the organics out of them. And that can be pretty expensive. Most of the big underground structures that people end up with take a lot of maintenance and are pretty expensive. And I'm just going to hazard a guess that, and you'll find that open sedimentation ponds are easier to maintain and cheaper to build than most of the underground structures that could possibly be used. When I first started my career, we did a pretty extensive study in Anchorage about oil and grit separators, these big concrete vaults, and they're designed to separate out the sediments, and then they come by and clean them out, which then you can have a Vector truck in order to clean them. And it's sort of city policy now after 15, 20 years of putting these things in the ground. They don't generally design projects with those as the solution anymore. They're just too expensive to maintain, and they don't get maintained. And whereas a sedimentation pond, you'll see it fill up. When it's full of sediment, you'll know it, and then you can get in there with a skid steer or something, clean it out and go again. And take the sediment to the landfill. So if you have the area for it, or if you have collected that sediment upstream in some sort of a swale or an LID device, that works better than these really expensive large underground vaults.
Off of the top of your head, or have you worked with other small communities? I'm just thinking or seen models that are effective. And I mean, our community has a very small area. So that would certainly hopefully be part of the conversation is like you said, having the area. I don't know if that's in the cards. We can look, but it's just.
My sense is that you don't have a lot of available public land to build infrastructure on, but at the same time, you have a very, I guess I would say, environmentally conscious population here.
Mhm.
And they're probably a lot of those people are on board for, putting in a rain garden, run it into their flower bed, do things like that. So there's, there may be other methods to make this work.
Okay. Follow-up question. How do wetlands impact stormwater management and drainage? We do have some significant wetlands that run through our very small community. And what do you guys look at for that?
Wetlands are perfect treatment for stormwater.
Okay.
Yeah, they settle things out, and the new snow disposal site that I designed for the city is in Connors Bog, and the outfalls from that snow disposal site are just going out into the general bog, and we're not really going to treat it. It's treated by the bog. So you got areas that open marsh areas that can handle that stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a pretty good spot for it.
We have a couple, so.
It may, if there's a lot of chlorides in your water, or other pollutants that could impact the vegetation types, sometimes there's a slight shift in the vegetation types in wetlands that are being used for treatment. But they're still wetlands. But my guess is that you won't have a lot of that here. And do you salt your streets?
We don't, no.
No.
I'm sorry, I was thinking more of water from the plant, but no, we don't salt our streets. Yeah.
There may be some, there's probably was trying to think whether. I've been in environments where the spray and mist from the ocean carries quite a bit of salt.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm sure you guys notice that around here. Things rust faster here than they do in other places because there is more salt in the air and it gets into the stormwater, but that's the natural environment for those wetlands, and the plants and whatnot are adapted to that already.
Calcium chloride, we do use, the state uses calcium chloride for some areas, not streets in town, correct me if I'm wrong, but the road going to the airport and then leaving town. And maybe on Anderson Way, I'm not sure. Somebody could correct me on that one.
Yes, Anderson Way is one of them, but not very much. Only when the dust is really, really bad.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely not very often.
So they use it as a dust suppressant, not as traction control.
Correct.
Yeah, during the summer,
Yeah.
but we don't do it for the rest of the town proper.
The city of Anchorage has switched over to magnesium chloride versus sodium. But they haven't been able to talk the state into doing it. So the state still puts sodium down in Anchorage on the DOT streets. So we have both.
What about sand? We do sand. And does that have as
Yeah, that's
significant of an
that's the
impact?
sediment in your snow that comes out of your snow melt.
Mhm.
And yeah, it gets caught in your sediment traps.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions, or do we got, we can take a round here before we get too far and see if anyone from the public has any questions. And then we can, just continue to work through this if there's more specifics on pieces and parts of this.
All right, we have no comments from the public at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing. Okay, sounds good. All right, we'll bring it back to council. Any other pieces, Bill or Casey, that were concerns or items of interest from the public as of yet?
Go back to your other list, Casey, and not this one, the one that had the discussion topics. Is there anything there that we missed?
I think so. The only thing that I was gonna add was if we do find a spot that for some reason has a large amount of oil or sheen that could be a potential pollutant, that we could treat in a different way. Because that if you have a lot of oil or grease, it will become floatable on the top of the stormwater. And so in that specific case, it might be using like an oil water separator. So it kind of depends on the situation and what the pollutant source may be. Let's see.
You guys have any hazardous waste sites?
Not in town. We have our Rocky Ridge landfill, but they collect hazardous waste and they get rid of it. So no, nothing directly. There has been a few areas of town that had pollutant issues in the past, but I believe they've been addressed.
Stuff left over from the herring industry days, probably.
Yeah, our old fuel tanks, underground fuel
Yeah,
tanks.
underground fuel tanks.
Few of those.
Yeah, some of that old stuff comes back to bite you. If you guys have probably taken care of most of it over the years. Maybe it's mostly cleaned up.
Yeah, I believe so. I've seen files from years and years ago, but I don't think we have anything active or current.
There was a public comment discussing potential contaminated sites and if DEC had looked into that. So But yeah, these are the survey questions. So the survey questions, there are 11 of them, and they range from anything between flooding, culverts, if they're undersized or unmaintained or failing, if water continues to stand in roadside ditches, if the roadway or your property has been threatened by eroding creeks or ditches, if there's any concerns with snow storage and then snow melt in the summer, if the community thought that the water quality of the stormwater system in the last 5 years or so has gotten worse, which we haven't really seen a lot of comments on. And then if they had any specific projects or programs that they thought the city might implement, basically any recommendations. And those were just a couple of different questions to try to pinpoint different characteristics and parameters that we're looking at, as well as other comments that the community might have, and incorporating those in.
Will these be available to view at some point?
Yeah, once the survey is closed at the end of this week, we'll consolidate them and then provide those responses.
Great. Did you guys hear any great recommendations or any recommendations?
There are only a few. I think they're pretty specific. The two were, one was just kind of a general comment about increasing the road system, like the road elevation, and ditching and properly installing culverts. And then the other comment was diverting water. They mentioned having a catch basin that would divert water out of the slough without eroding the bank or grade of the road, so that water on the other side, I think, goes down farther. I think they were concerned that water was either running along the roads or overtopping and creating potholes and damaging the roads. There's some sort of diversion that would lessen that effect.
Through the mayor, follow-up question that just keeps coming to mind during this discussion is that the city did in the past have issues with leaky pipes. So our water system used to have a very large issue where we were, I think it was between 300 and 500,000 gallons of water a day that went through. And mind you, this is like 8 years ago now at this point, and we have closed that up a lot, but we do have very old pipes, and we can see sometimes there are issues with infiltration and both our sewer and our water, and that we do have there is a specific area in town where the water is so corrosive that it is corroding our septic line, and we know that that's happening, that we're trying to address that through a different forum. But I don't know if that's something you guys look at or have heard of or familiar with, impact on utility mains and or utility mains impact on stormwater management. At this point, I'd say our water system is pretty buttoned up, and we're only between like the 60 and 80,000 gallon a day usage, which is about right for our community. But because of our pipes, we do have, or the age of our infrastructure, we do have regular leaks that occur, and we address them as soon as we can. And we would like to not see us get back to a place where we have all that treated water going into the ground. But I don't know if that's something that you guys would want to look at or of concern or you've heard of, but bring that up.
Yeah, HDR does, a lot of that sort of I work.
Mhm.
And mapping of water and sewer infrastructure and trying to figure out areas that need upgrading and whatnot. And like you say, there's some areas where you run a galvanized pipe through an old bog area, it just rots it right out because
Mhm.
the bog is so acidic that it eats up the pipes. But that's probably beyond the scope of this,
Okay.
the storm drain study. Certainly if we find areas where the culverts or storm drain pipes are rotting out, that comes under this. But the other two pieces of the utility, which of course is the water and sewer, that sort of falls outside this.
So not so much concern about inflow or infiltration if that's occurring into the stormwater from those utilities.
Yeah, we know that would almost be, we'd have to come down here with the video camera and run it down the lines and see if we can find those specific spots. I don't know how extensive your stormwater pipe system is, whether that might be something that we would recommend. Here's a section of storm drain where we're looking at one end of it, there's no water, and we go down to the other end of the next manhole, and there's a whole bunch of water gushing out, and we go, well, you got a problem here. And then you got to run a CCTV down it and see if you can figure out what the problem is. The adjacent water line rotted out and it's eaten a hole in the storm drain line, and the water's cross connecting. More commonly, you get cross connections between sewer and water and storm drain lines.
Okay.
Some of those are inadvertent. A lot of early storm drain systems were combined sewers, and they started life as both storm and sewer lines, and they all went into the harbor untreated. But I don't know if you guys were ever in that era.
Definitely in an untreated era, but I don't think it was stormwater. And that was a long time ago.
Yeah. If we find any of that, we would certainly tell you.
I was just curious how that works. I don't think there's so much of an issue anymore, but certainly in the past.
Yeah, of course, your water lines are all pressurized, so generally the water, you hope that the water just goes out of those, not the other way around.
Yeah. And with it being more buttoned up, it's we know at this point if there's a leak that's sprung, it's easy to see. But I was just thinking about what that looks like with that going into the ground, but it is already treated, so I guess it's not as prevalent.
Another source of chlorine.
Uh-huh.
The city's Anchorage municipal system, they go around and they sample the storm drain outfalls for water quality and look for chlorine in those outfalls, and that's an indication that there's some sort of cross connection and that they're getting treated city water into the storm drains, and that stuff shows up. I don't believe we put any of that into this study. There's no lab testing or any of that sort of stuff for your outfalls. Certainly something we could do if it looked like there was possibility of that being an issue.
It'd be great just to know, I think.
Yeah. So you need a fairly extensive storm drain system, and then we would map out where the water lines are vis-a-vis the storm drain lines and figure out whether there was a potential there for cross connection. If you're losing a lot of water, it's coming out the end of the storm drain pipes, then it might be worth testing for that.
I have a quick question on the actual survey. So did it get emailed out, or how are people responding? Is it written or electronic? I haven't seen it yet. So how is it disseminated out to the public?
The survey was sent out on a little postcard mailer to residents, as well as I think that there's posters maybe around town with the same survey link. And then that survey link is accessible online, just a SurveyMonkey survey to fill out.
Okay, so it's a SurveyMonkey. Okay, I got you.
We sent those postcards to everybody but the mayor.
No, it is on our Facebook. There's a link on our Facebook page as well as on our website, and we did send it out through the email public notification list. So we can do that again if you need, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I was looking on the city's website. I didn't see it on the main page unless it's buried somewhere.
We
It's
will
possible.
look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I got one for my son whose address, he uses my address, who lives in town. But I did not receive one, but I did use his QR code and then was able to access the Survey Monkey. So not everybody got one sent to. But you're saying that you sent a survey card to every resident in Seldovia?
Through
That
the
was a-
mayor. The list was generated by property owners, so every property owner in Seldovia should have received one. I don't think that we sent duplicates out, so.
Yeah, they don't go to duplicates, and because Evan's name starts with an E and yours starts with a B, that's why he always gets those de facto and you don't.
Oh, well, not sure about that. He owns a different project, but anyhow, so at this point, you're gonna be here how many days to kind of, and the Public Works is gonna be here. I mean, they're the people who know what's going on in this community better than most of us, except for what we see it with our eye every now and then. How long are you in town doing your research? And then when will you follow back up with the city council?
So we're in town through Friday of this week, Friday or Saturday. And then our preliminary drainage mapping will be completed. We'll have a draft of it, I believe, early next year.
Okay,
Through the mayor, and I can provide it in an upcoming packet. The grant schedule does have things spread out a little bit. So between their work and then also between funding, that's why it has a 1.5-year process.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds good. Any additional questions or comments from council? Okay, we can try. I don't know. I can't see how many people are online, if there's a few folks online or not. We can see one more crack if there's anyone from the public online that wishes to offer a comment or has any questions.
Yeah, Radzi here. I just wanted to comment that we have at times tested water for leaks. It's not intended to deal with the rainfall, but testing for leaks.
Yeah. Okay. We could get that data. That'd be good.
And I just wanted to come, I'm Jen Yeager. I work for the city also. But in terms of testing at the outfalls for contaminants and so on, that's actually precluded under the terms of the grant.
Okay.
I found that interesting for something that was titled Alaska Clean Water Action. But because we originally did have testing for pollutants in there to see if we could pinpoint what it was that was, getting into the system, and the state said no. So there were no endpoint testing, no endpoint water quality testing,
That's another grant, I guess.
apparently.
Thanks, Jen, for clarifying that.
We have no other members of the public at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right, Heidi, did you have anything, any other final comments for tonight?
No, not at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, sounds good. Bill or Casey, what about you guys? Anything you wanted to finish up with before we wrap it up this evening?
Well, we're staying just across the street here. If anybody has any stuff while we're here, send them over. We'll be driving around town in a side by side with bright orange vests on, and be hard to miss.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm sure people are always willing to come up and ask what strangers are doing when they're walking around town. So I'm sure there'll be no shortage of that. So, all right. Well, appreciate the update where you guys are at. Thanks for the work. And then, yeah, I'm sure Heidi will keep us up to speed on, the timeline and the outline for the grant and all the stipulations there. And then we'll look for a draft of your work, or whether it's a draft or a final report when you guys get closer to the end. So would it be a draft, or would you guys just come out with a final?
Next summer, we'll have a draft of our drainage improvement projects to show to the council and the city, and then we'll go ahead and finalize from there afterwards.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, well, excellent. Appreciate the update on that. And again, thanks you guys for coming tonight and sharing where you're at in the process with everyone. And then, yeah, we'll go ahead and adjourn from the work session here. And then that'll give everyone about 30 minutes, and we'll be back at 6 o'clock for the regular council meeting. That sound good?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, we're adjourned from the work session.
Okay, see you
Thanks.
shortly.